One of the biggest moments in Final Fantasy X happened at the beginning of the story, when Sin invaded Zanarkand and transported Auron and Tidus to Spira with this legendary phrase.
You are sure?
This set off a massive chain of events that eventually led to the downfall of Sin and the start of the Eternal Calm, despite what Final Fantasy X 2.5 has to say about it. One of the main factors of this catalyst was the fact that Tidus came to Spira with an outsider's view in a world where the Yevon faith and its teachings taught the population that Sin was indestructible and could never be defeated. If you ask me, this was nothing more than a tool that the faith took advantage of in order to keep the population in check and prevent them from advancing technologically, hence the widespread ban on Machina. However, there is something interesting about this event: the timing. Now, it wouldn't be surprising if most of us thought this, but the timing of Jecht's invasion of Zanarkand, was it correct? Why couldn't he have transported Tidus earlier in Spira's timeline? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going back to the world of Spira, the world in which most of us are familiar with, as we explore an analysis video: was the timing correct on Jecht transporting Tidus to Spira? Okay, I swear I'll come up with a better title. It just sounded good in my head before I said it, but we get the idea. Anyway, let's delve right into today's lore video. So this is mostly review for all of us, but we know that Jecht made the exact same pilgrimage as Tidus did 10 years prior, alongside Auron and Braska. The three would go on to complete the pilgrimage, as Braska would defeat Sin using the final Aeon and bring the calm to Spira. Yuna did the exact same thing 10 years later with Tidus by her side, as well as the rest of her guardians including Auron, and would bring about the calm, but this time at a much more permanent state. It's safe to say there are major differences between the two pilgrimages, at least in terms of the events that took place during the journey, and Jecht played a massive part in how the second journey turned out. Let's revisit Jecht's journey. When Jecht became Braska's guardian, Braska was already in his mid-30s and had resolved to become a summoner and embark on the journey to defeat Sin. Now, when a summoner embarks on this path, they are already very well aware of the outcome. They do not survive to the end, and one of their guardians must become the final Aeon in order to defeat Sin. And they especially know that it is not a permanent solution, but only brings about a temporary calm until Sin returns with the final Aeon, at the time as the new core. Not only is it a sad cycle of life and death, but a very hopeless one, hence why there are only a handful of summoners who have achieved this feat and have posthumously obtained the title of High Summoner. While Braska was hopeful that maybe this time things will be different, it was Auron who objected, imploring that they find another way to defeat Sin and reject the final summoning. But by the time this happens, Jecht already accepted his fate and became the final Aeon, which would turn him into Sin. But let's be honest, there's nothing new about what I just talked about. While it is important to this video, this is only news to you who have never played Final Fantasy X before. And if you haven't, go play it. Even if you have, if you know someone who hasn't, go make them play it. Anyway, it is what happens after Jecht became Sin that this question starts to rise. One of Jecht's wishes was to bring his son to Spira for two reasons: to experience the world outside of their little bubble, and the second was to find a way to defeat him permanently. Now, we know Auron looked over Tidus growing up, as both of his parents were gone by this time. However, as an unsent, Auron was able to freely travel between Zanarkand and Spira without feeling the effects of Sin's toxin. So surely he could have been able to lead Tidus to Sin and transport them both to Spira much earlier than they did. Well, granted, Auron is not Sin, so I don't think that was his call to make in the first place. And I don't think Jecht would have been able to have that kind of conversation with Auron since, well, he was kind of busy trying to resist the temptation of Sin through Yevon. So it is likely that it was Jecht's choice to invade Dream Zanarkand when he did and transport Tidus to Spira. But was this timing correct? Well, as Sin, Jecht knows the location of Dream Zanarkand almost instantly, so he could have done it any time. And Auron could have watched over Tidus in Spira from when he was a child. However, this is where a rift in the story would be caused. If we take a closer look at the state of Spira's society, everyone who lives in Spira only knows one type of life, and that is Yevon's teachings. Of course, there is the exception of the Abed, who are rebellious to the Yevon faith, and are often persecuted by it. But I think if Tidus grew up in this society, then he would have likely adopted that mindset and would not have attempted to challenge their point of view. While Auron might have been able to shield him to an extent from that way of thinking, perhaps even aligning him with the Al Bhed, I don't think he would have been able to completely stop the influence from happening in some form, as he would have been competing against Spira's entire society, all spearheaded by the Yevon faith. One of the main contributors to the party eventually defeating Sin permanently was the fact that Tidus came into Spira with a rebellious and an outsider's mindset, consistently challenging the genuinity of those who practice Yevon and their more sinister motives, especially from the higher clergy. It also helped that Yuna was also only 16 years old, and as much as we praise her for her vigilance from all forms of opposition, from Seymour attempting to use her and the Al Bhed kidnapping summoners to prevent them from finishing their pilgrimage, it was her resolve and ability to defy the status quo by fighting against Yunalesca along with encouragement from her guardians that allowed the party to find a different way to defeat Sin. Because Braska did not have the same support Yuna did in terms of their mindsets, he was not able to resolve to that conclusion, and kind of fell onto the hope that if they did the same thing, then things would change, which I don't like to say it because Braska was a badass character, but it is insane, even though it's not his fault because that's the world he grew up in. He needed an outsider's point of view, and unfortunately, Jecht could not do it while he was alive because he was not able to have that sense of creativity to find a different way to defeat Sin, just like the way Tidus and Yuna did with their party. If Tidus had arrived in Spira earlier than he actually did, he would have likely fallen into that same hole that Jecht did. But because he arrived at the age of 17, he was able to develop his mindset enough that when he came into Spira, his rebellious personality due to his dynamic with Jecht, combined with the outsider's point of view towards Spira, was a big catalyst on the story's direction. So was Jecht correct in the timing of when he transported Tidus into Spira? I would say yes. I think transporting him earlier would have made it difficult to find a different solution to the Sin problem, and may have more or less resulted in a similar conclusion to Braska's ending. So to answer the legendary Orin's question at the beginning of the game with the retrospective of the entire lore, yes, Jecht was sure in bringing Tidus along to Spira. That is assuming that's what he was even referring to during that scene, who knows. And even though Dream Zanarkand was destroyed during that scene, most of us know that Dream Zanarkand was probably refixed because the Faith were still dreaming by the time the party reached Mount Gagazet. So Dream Zanarkand, it's kinda hard to destroy. I guess that's something that even Sin doesn't have the capability of doing. At least not voluntarily. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like as it helps get the video exposed to more Final Fantasy fans, and comment to what other questions you might have that we can make a video on. I love getting ideas from you all, and it forces me to think of the answer using character and lore analysis. And consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more Final Fantasy content. Other than that, this is Enzo signing out, and that, as they say, is that.